Niklas, who had an undefeated 5-0 run with his Green Tide list. Yes, I'm starting out with this. Yes, it is the prior points, but this list is easy to change. Just move the Ludus off the list, and boom, you have your points back made enough. You simply add another enhancement, or like we've seen this past weekend where someone ran a very similar archetype and they just added another war boss on the list and changed the Ludas and downgraded a different unit. So there's very similar variations of this that still works, but Nicholas sent me the information, the notes and everything, so we're going to go over this with some depth, and I was very proud and enjoyed this because Nicholas just immediately was like, hey, I learned this from when I was looking at Noah's archetype, what he was doing. Didn't look at his PDF, but I've seen the video. I tested it out, and I felt like it was a great counter to his meta. So therefore, he went in there and he called it right because he knew who was going to be there. He knew the kind of list that were running around. And I think Orc players can learn from this because even this past weekend, we had someone go 4-1 with Green Tide is going into the same meta that everyone's worried about with more dakka. So if you're looking to pivot to Tide, War Horde, Tactical Brigade, these are all options as more dakka it possibly looks to get cooked or nuked from GW. Shout out to our sponsors, the Baron of Dice, as they helped us do our wall tactic dice. So shout them out. Check them out in the description, 5% off in the discount because nobody likes taxes. And shout out to Baron of Dice. They allow us to do our paint competition. So thank you very much to them. So let's take a quick look until my gets out here. Nicholas, where he was out here. Goodness, I was having a brain fart where this is from, right? And he actually had the missions. That was great. Now I want to press this because I should have known this off top. Thank you. It was Finland. I didn't want to speak out of mind. Okay, so it was out of pocket. So he sent me this. He knew what was going on. It was a direct, conscious effort. He said, I'm going to take Green Tide, even if it was someone else's archetype. Don't mind. I've played so much orcs and so much melee armies that I can handle it. And he was right. He handled it quite well. So let's take a look at his enemy matchups and actually his path to victory, of course, because context matters. So mission 1, round 1 was Terraform, Swift Action, Sweeping Engagement. This was WTC Mat 57. So he actually sent me a video that I watched, and that was fantastic. I actually enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And he was kind of really just demonstrating where everything was being deployed for the beginning of his game, and that did help. And just the density of the WTC would help with his firing lanes that I did appreciate, especially if you end up going first. That looked like a really big factor, and it really was pretty nice to witness. But the fact that you don't get to play around with that 1.1 inch away from the wall, you can't fight me factor does also make certain things like World Eaters look terrifying. So he was thinking about all of these things when he was going into this matchup. And one thing that he didn't think about, though, was Deathwatch. So in his first matchup, he just said, I never played on Deathwatch ever. Been playing since 8th edition. He started with this one small army in 8th edition, had about 1,000 points. But since then, he's never ever played Deathwatch, so he had no idea what was going to happen here. Therefore, let's take a look at this list. He had a Captain in Gravis armor with the Tomb of Ectoclati. Mind you, side note, I used to own a Deathwatch army, and it was fantastic, and I got rid of it because I own too many armies. So then we have a Judiciar with Thief of Secrets, a Lieutenant with Combi Weapon, and then a Watchmaster. He did end up locking down this Judiciar that was in a Rhino on turn 1 because he did not going first, and so his commandos ended up making a charge. He only needed about a 7-inch charge, got a big 12-inch, completely boxed out the Rhino, so it couldn't get off right away. But throughout the game, this guy started to juice up and started to hit Kalo Kin times 10 and just cut through a bunch of characters and boys. But nonetheless, he got taken down like all things do when you go into the Green Tide. You get eroded, and the Judiciar got stuck in the mud. So then we have a Lieutenant with a combi weapon, like we said, and the Watchmaster. So he had Deathwatch veterans, another Deathwatch Terminator squad, and then some infiltrators, a Talon strike team, and 2 rhinos and a storm speeder strike. So just for the note real quick, what he did is because it was Terraform, he straight up he got first, he jumped out and tried to make sure that he can get on multiple objectives so he can set up Terraform. He didn't really make it to the first one and really decided that he didn't want to overcommit on the CP reroll and didn't know really the enemy output, so he didn't get it on the middle, but he did activate 2 different Terraforms, one on both both of the middle objectives. Like I said, the Mandos did end up pushing it, and the fact that he knew the enemy had stuff in reserves, like these big strike teams, meant that when it was his time on turn 2, he took out the Storm Boys and threw them up the field. I have myself played this archetype of Green Tide, and having all these small units so that you can activate either early, interact in skirmishes, score, manipulate the battlefield, draw out enemies so that they can get in firing lanes, or they can call charges on you, is a big factor, because you're not max scaling skewing with just full boys. You just end up playing more mind games, manipulating regrowing boys onto objectives, staging very well, and having commandos is very important for the battlefield manipulation, as you're very slow and you can't just stage in the middle, let them shoot your dudes, surge 6 inches, and then stage up and regrow like we used to do. We couldn't do that anymore. And we're very aware of that. We're not as durable as we used to be. Therefore, that takes more shenanigans and thought. Therefore, when it was his time and he got his secondaries pulled off, he decided, well, I'm going to throw my Storm Boys to the middle, but in a way that they can't get shot and they have to kind of draw themselves out to get shot in order to be shot. And in that case, they're closer to me, and I can end up getting some charges off. So nonetheless, he just said his Ludas staged up that were in this. Like I said, if you're playing it now, you might not even have Ludas on your list, but they set up to shoot some middle objectives. So he ended up winning this one, a 93-point win. And then we move on to his second. Let me move me back. What's up, Gits? I see everybody's excited. You guys should be excited about Green Tide. I promise you. Because as we look at the other lists that we're doing well, whether you're more dakka or you're playing War Horde, whatever it is, a lot of the different orc lists and examples we're going to be demonstrating are actually bringing and valuing multiple 20-man unit of Ork Boys, which is something that you can go back to our index videos that we were pushing how to use Ork Boy mob videos with Stephen Paprine, where we were demonstrating how the value of a 20-man unit of Ork Boys are without even a Green Tide detachment existing. So there are certain values and manipulations of the battlefield and objectives and everything that 20-man unit of Ork Boys can do. And if you understand that, it's really one of the bread and butter, the fundamental core pieces of orcs throughout multiple editions and rule sets. So I definitely say learn to use 20-man unit Ork Boys anyway. So even if you don't want to max out with these guys, you can gain something from just understanding how even a Tide would play on the battlefield, especially if you go into it. Hint, hint, mirror happens. So let's go into game 2. And we got my boy Andrew, super supportive, my get. Andrew Stone with $5. Woo, for the super chat. You get. Let me know what you've been thinking right now, Gator. How are you feeling about Dakka? Because you're always super supportive, and I want to know what you're thinking out there. So let me know what's going on, and it's so worth it. And thank you very much, Andrew Stone. That's very generous of you. It means a lot when you guys do it. It's so much that if I dwell on it, I lose my focus, but it's very humbling. So then we go to his second game, which was the World Eaters, which is kind of like a low-key rival since they came into the 40K player-based community, right? There's like a player percentage or a part of the org player base that also plays World Eaters, just because they're a different variety of melee get stuck in. I understand that. I have a Custodes army, so I understand having that kind of different variety. But in some cases, they're kind of like the rival, because you're running into them constantly, and you're like, dude, I want to beat the crap out of these guys. I don't like that they pressure me, right? So so let's talk about this. So we have Angron, Lord Avocado, World Eaters, Lord on Juggernaut, and then 2 units of 10 Jackals with their sticky, 2 3-man units of 8-bound, a 3-man exalted unit, a 6-man unit exalted unit, and then 2 Chaos Bomb, followed by 2 World Eater Mauler Fiends. These guys are low-key awesome. Like just for fun. I mean, like as an orc, right? Speaking to you as orcs. Just because which the guys doesn't have shooting, but if they did have shooting, they can get kind of blooded, so they can get additional like buffs to charging and getting stuck in. In this case, he's not taking advantage of that, but it does bring like a different combat variety and profile to it. Nonetheless, the fact that they're new detachments allows them to pick what they want to do. A lot makes them more threatening. Of course, then they still have to roll their dice though to get the value they want. But one thing he said is he was very, very familiar with World Eaters. Now, the reason he was familiar is because simply he plays a lot of combat armies, but he thought of this as a tough matchup, and that's something that Noah himself brings up. Is that Green Tide? World Eaters actually brings the output, the volume, the wounding potential, everything that you don't really like, the initiative as an orc, as a combat army, to pick up your mob units and put a lot of pressure and put you on the back foot, not let you stand on the objective and bang it out. Just kind of take that from you, stick you their way up the field as they kind of beat you back. Gets kind of annoying. So in this case, he was worried about it, but at the same time, he was very, very familiar, which means he was very on his P's and Q's when it came to the melee, and he felt like he was just had a little bit of the edge when it came to the skill set, what it was. But him being familiar with the matchup meant that he understood how to really take advantage of screening. What I mean by screening is he would set walls of barriers of trash units, whether it's trucks or flash kits or storm boys or grots, that would kind of sit in front of the World Eaters and kind of soak up their initiative. So the Mandos in this matchup ended up being the first turn sacrifice. He did go second, as in Nicholas went second. But he was fine with that because the World Eater's lift ran straight into his commandos. And then in that case, he was able to shoot at him, start popping off, getting some charges off, and killing him. And eventually, he ended up actually essentially tabling the World Eater's player by turn 3 and really just kind of gunking up and grounding combat, focusing on everything else. So Mandos, huge factor. As we continue to develop as Ork players, one thing is that playing the infiltrate game is a factor at the high level tables. If you don't want to play it, it's totally fine. You don't have to. I've enjoyed and had good games without it, but I'm just saying a lot of the time playing that additional phase is another way you can look at it. Does allow you to manipulate the battlefield before the turns even start, but it does take repetition and such like that. So I understand if you don't do it, but he stresses how important Mandos were specifically in this matchup because how they dictate the pace, right? And as we go on for some of these matchups and even other detachments and lists we cover, Commandos play a big factor in this, which is something like we've always said, right? Mandos lead the way, baby. Whoa. All right, so see, I didn't want too loud. I held it back. All right, so then we go into his game 3. What's up, chat? You guys follow me? You guys follow me? All right, cool. Make sure everybody's worked up because I know some of you guys get worked up about world eaters, and I get it because they be getting my nerves too. So nobody likes Mr. Mo, right? Then we go into his third game, which was Adeptus Custodes. One thing he did point out is he also plays Adeptus Custodes, and in this case, he manages to say that the fact that it was Talons of the Emperor meant that he was like, all right, cool. He might not actually have the output to really kill me fully, but still kind of threatening. So we'll see what happens. We have 3 Blade Champions, Custodian Guard, 2 Grav Tanks, 2 Warden, 2 Prosecutor, 2 Venatari units, minimum size, 2 Witch Seekers. Bam. And he just mentions here, one thing he mentioned that was funny is the Clidius Grav Tanks had no one to shoot at, and he did end up reserving his Mandos. So because he didn't want to give the Custodes just big charges. This is what I mean when I say that people need to kind of like have a learning curve when playing Commandos. There are games when you just reserve them because you don't want to give enemies the ability to advance charge into you and take the initiative in this sort of matchup. So he ended up putting them in reserve, bringing them in, and doing I think it was established locust, and the enemy was like, I have to shoot those with my grav tanks because they have no other option, which doesn't go well, if you're an Ork player. If I have a Benvol and stealth, he's just shooting a couple shots, not really that cool, but it was a funny factor that they just end up becoming almost non-factors besides the tanks. One thing that he did say about this matchup he said a couple of things about this matchup, but he said that based off the WCC terrain, if you've ever familiar with it, it does have like a little bit of a cutout and a notch that goes a little lower. That's below around 3 inches. The banner of the custodians end up kind of peaking there for the wardens based off the placement of the individual player. And Niklas is very familiar with that, right? That's where the difference between someone who gets repetition, practice, understand weak spots on the actual deployment zone and terrain layout is the difference in when we speak about skill sometimes, right? And in this case, he understood, well, if this person places this banner on the actual terrain piece, I can actually shoot at him. Therefore, he set it up so that his truck can move onto that into line of sight, shoot at that actual warden unit that was staged up in terrain. It did draw the enemy feel no pain, right? This is where a little bit of that fear mongering was a little bit of a benefactor for us, where someone just hears about what tank busters do. They hear that they're just going to eliminate you and they're -3 AP and all this stuff, and they don't consider, well, it's only with the pulse, it's only right under they don't consider the conditional situational killingness of a tank buster and the fact that the shock attack gun is most of the value behind the tank buster unit, right? That's where a little bit of the fear mongering, a little bit of the the I don't know, I'd say maybe exaggeration of the value of a tank buster unit and not the clarity that the SAG itself, the shock attack gun and the value itself is the killy part of the tank buster unit in a lot of matchups, means that he ended up popping the feel no pain, which in hindsight isn't great. The flash kits themselves only have 1 AP. Tank busters only have 2 AP. He's in cover. He's 2-up save. He's taking 3 ups to the tank busters, 2 ups to the flash kits. But just the fact that he's so hyped up about their dakka, which in some, in more dakka, it's valuable. It's true. But this is where we talk about, we hope GW doesn't really nail the units. We don't want tank busters to go up anymore. We just want more dakka to be kind of adjusted, right? And in this case, that guy popped the feel no pain, which we can say, haha, you didn't do it. But if you weren't familiar with the army and the faction, you heard all these things about one of their units without all the context, you might make the same mistake. So it's all good. It just happens. That's just kind of one of the factors in 40K, right? Other than that, he said they just kind of nothing too creative about this game. They duked out in the middle after he didn't give him too any easy charges. It was the ritual. Oh, my goodness, how did I not say what mission it was? So mission 2 was linchpin, fog of war, tipping point. It just didn't matter that much for world leaders. Pretty much, it was just duke it out, kill you, table do turn 3. WTC map 51. Round 3, though, the ritual, swift action, crucible of battle. In this case, he was just saying that he didn't make any of these like fancy charges with his big weird boy mob to steal steal the enemy's home objective, or that their natural objective that they spawned close to their own home objective. But they just duked it out. He ended up winning the primary game, and that ended up making the difference. So shout out to him. So far, the game just works out with having the redundancy, Tankbustas, shooting, Mandos, 2 flash gets, SWAT teams. Everybody loves. Then we go into his round 4. Now he says he's very familiar with this man, Mr. Niklas Alexis, because he was familiar with the fact that he was bringing Tau, that he didn't know the detachment too well, which is auxiliary cadre, and he didn't really want this match going into it. But that's what happens a lot of the time, right? The world gives you what you don't want sometimes, but that you can handle. So then that's just how God works. So Nicholas was like, let's see what happens here. So he went into Tau round 4. Let's take a look at his list before we give you some context for how it rolled out, because it sounded like it was pretty. So he had Cadre Fireblade, Commander and Cold Star Battle Suit, Commander and Enforcer Suit, Breacher Team. Lokion Breacher teams are freaking awesome against Orc, which is annoying if you're on objectives, right? They just reroll wounds, great volume. So then we have Crew Carnivores, 2 units of those, a unit of Pathfinders, unit of Stealth Suits, Vespids, 2 units of 3 Rampagers. One thing that he points out that he did end up getting some great value out of his flash kits. He didn't really kill that many, but he ended up taking it. But he got that multiple phase activation going on where he shot the Rampagers with some flash kits, charged into some Pathfinders, got to pick those guys up early in the game. That's something that we appreciate as Orc players, that you can even have that option. Some 2 units of 5-man Recruit Hounds, 2 units of 3 Crisis Knife Fire Battle Suits, 2 units of Crisis Star Scythe battle suits, and then 1 unit of Sun Forge battle suits with a Ghost Keel, Skyray gunship, and then Devilfish. So if you're playing against Tau, you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff. They have a lot of infiltration, scouting. They give you a different kind of pressure. So some cheeky Tau players would be like, well, I have actually gone close to you, and that's actually the right move by them. And in this case, he was very familiar with that, and therefore the Tau player just got actually first on the deployment to be the defender. He chose to deploy first so that he can end up infiltrating and trying to screen out the commandos, but he couldn't screen everything. But he did string them along quite well. In that case, Nicholas responded by screening out the other side of the battlefield and stopping the Tau scouting, because you know that there's transports can actually scout, and then they can end up getting great lines of sight, put some pressure on you, and they want to take up the battlefield, set up a lot of layers of screens, shoot you down, have the game kind of delay, and then take all your assets away as they can, kind of gang up on you. So in this matchup, he was saying that let's see. The fact that he went first was a big fact. So when he went first, he ended up saying, hey, I pulled turn 1. He ended up pulling Secure No Man's Land. And I forgot what the other one was. I didn't write it with ugly handwriting. Secure No Man's Land, and I didn't see what else. Sorry. So, but Area Denial. That's what it was. So he ended up drawing those to a turn 1, and he said, therefore, I'm going to be quite aggro and take my commandos again, as he did early in the tournament, and just go straight into the enemy lines, make a charge, and get stuck in and try to hold them back. It's something that I always say about commandos as well. When people are like, well, let's bring them down in points. The issue if you bring commandos down too much in points is that they become a huge factor into one specific type of, army or faction, and it's a big thing because they can't be overwatched. So in this case, he used it against them, charged them up, and ended up taking the enemy, pushing them back, and putting the pressure right away. Taking his skirmish units to pick up all his initial screens as he staged up his big tide. And then from there, he called the wall on a turn 3 instead of turn 2 because his big tide units hadn't really taken any damage turn 1. So he still had that 5-up invuln to sit on. Therefore, he just went straight into the turn 3 wall and then overran the Tau. So I thought that was fantastic. And he ended up getting a 100-point win against the army that he ended up fearing most, right? So that's pretty crazy. And then we go into his last matchup, which, like I hinted at earlier, because I am not a liar, this was his mirror matchup. He ended up going against another Orc player, which was Juso. I think I covered this last week. If you want to check his list out any further, but he ended up running the Warhorde list, right? So we're going to cover some more Warhorde lists today, don't worry. But we have 2 beast bosses, a big mech, which actually was a factor, big mech with shock attack gun, Gazgul Thraka, a solo baby mech, and then a Warboss, follow me, lads. He had 2 10-man units of Beast Snaggle Boys, and then a 20-man unit of Boyz. You're going to be seeing this a lot today. 20-man units of Boyz just be coming out. 3 units of trucks, a battle wagon, 1 unit of Breaker Boys, 5-man unit of Flash Kits, 2 units of Gretchen, 2 Mega Nubs, 2 units of Storm Boys, and then 1 Tankbusta. So he did have less dakka than our Green Tide counterpart, Niklas. That did play a factor because Niklas did end up staging up in the firing lanes, thinking that he had the advantage between his looter's range, the rerolls onto the immediate objectives, more Tankbustas, and then just Flash Kits for more skirmishing. So he ended up feeling like that was helpful. But one thing he said was, one, he understood that in this matchup, just like the World Leaders matchup, that he was very familiar with his enemy and how to deal with the melee matchup as to deal with screens coming first. Didn't have enough and the mission, sorry, the mission was actually a factor. This was round 5, linchpin, raise banner, search and destroy. So realize this at this time, Orks players, there's 2 Orc players that are undefeated 4-0 going into round 5. This is why I say even if they take more dakka off the menu, we're still eating good, like my boy Jay Hune said earlier on the stream. So in this case, linchpin is very important. You keep your home objective. And the fact that you're playing search and destroy means someone's going to be hecka aggro, right? And in this case, one thing that Niklas pointed out was that the enemy actually wasn't aggressive, and Niklas was. He took his commandos, put them right up on there, put all the screens right in the front, and just said, "Well, if you're gonna come at me, I got screens to take it." In this place, the other person was a little bit more apprehensive, and I understand the reason he was. He had less assets and wanted to really put a killing blow on this Green Tide unit, and we're going to see that he actually had a chance to do that as we go forward. So in this matchup, the enemy not being a factor was something Niklas said was a weakness, though. Even though I said I can sympathize and understand why he did it, I'm just saying that Niklas said that that was an issue because as he was able to move his screen forwards, it meant that he was able to move his dakka into the firing lanes and then put his Green Tides in places where they kind of felt like they could kind of stage up or not be too aggroed on. There was a point on turn 3 where Niklas knew that he had to kind of get stuck in with a battle wagon with so that he can actually wrap the enemy's unit of a big mech. And I think it was 20 boys. It was a big mech with 20 boys that he had. And he said that unit just kind of chucked itself across the field when he couldn't really stage up and really stop it fully from disembarking. Or was it Breaker Boys? He didn't really specify which unit exactly it was. No, it was a Breaker Boy unit. I lied. It was a Breaker Boy unit. No, it was a 20-man unit because you had to follow me, lads. I lied again. See, haha. So it was a 20-man unit. So because he said he tried to make a nice big charge off on the battle wagon so that he can kind of trap it so that the enemy couldn't actually disembark with his big unit and counterpunch him and kill him. But in that case, he failed to wrap the wagon. And in that case, when it was the enemy's turn, the enemy ended up pulling I have it, Call the Horde and Overwhelming Force. So the enemy declared their wall and said, I'm going to pick up 2 units of 20-man Orc Boys. And that's what he did. He ended up running up, picking up screens, picking up 2 20-man unit Orc Boys. Because the Big Mac what existed, he was able to run through screens and actually run through and punch some of the valuable units that Niklas had. So very nice tech piece over here by our fellow Warboss out here, Jinsun Kinkakin, that we covered last week, ended up working as a nice tech piece to really punch out 20 of those 20-man bricks. It was actually the unit with the Feel Pain that got chopped through. He popped 5 of Feel Pains and just ended up killing that. He wasn't in Gaz's range either. Niklas said that he felt like he might have survived it because he was like, "Oh, he's not in Gaz's range. I'm actually survived this," but he ended up not surviving. Other than that, he said that what pretty much was happening at this, and further other than that was now the rest of Juso's army was kind of running into screens. Other than that, big unit of boys that we just talked about. Therefore, he said, "Okay, now I've kind of stemmed the Orc aggression. I'm going to call my wall." So now Niklas himself called a wall, which is the counter punch at this point, right? So he went into and started picking up his killy assets. He ended up using a unit of commandos to pick up his beast snagga boys that are kind of near a little kind of staged up kind of safely. He shot some snagga boys that were near the middle objective and then leaving just the bosses. But between the dakka that was left over, of course, like we always say, the Green Tide list, always use grenades, always use your squig bombs, always use multi-phase damage so that you can really do the best damage you can because you're not really that good at fighting. There's something good enough. Therefore, he used all his shooting and it took down the boy units to weak enough that he was just kind of like the characters left over, picked them up. He felt like he had kind of stemmed the aggression of the Orc player by tying up his scoring assets and tying up some of his killing units and continuing to have the ability to keep the advantage in scoring. There was other things that were going on there, but nonetheless, Niklas did a great job and he did not lose that Orc mirror matchup and ended up getting a 99-point win to end up getting his golden ticket. Congratulations to you. and you're going to see you at the World Championships as a representative from Finland, rocking the Orks and possibly the Green Tide or whatever you take. So shout out to this Git. Whoa! Be a cunning Git and check out our new order markers that are in our store. So shout out to you Gits being cunning. Help you guys get all the orders on the table nice and clean for all you Gits to get stuck in. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!